According to ancient and medieval science, ether, also spelled ether or ether, also called quintessence, is the material that fills the region of the universe above the terrestrial sphere. The concept of ether was used in several theories to explain several natural phenomena, such as the traveling of light and gravity. In the late 19th century, physicists postulated that ether permeated all throughout space, providing a medium through which light could travel in a vacuum. But evidence for the presence of such a medium was not found in the Michelson-Morley experiment. Mythological origins. The word alpha theta eta rho in Homeric Greek means pure, fresh air, or clear sky. In Greek mythology, it was thought to be the pure essence that the gods breathed, filling the space where they lived, analogous to the air breathed by mortals. It is also personified as a deity, Aether, the son of Erebus and Nyx in traditional Greek mythology. Ether is related to alpha theta omega, to incinerate, and intransitive to burn, to shine, meaning people with a burnt visage. See also Empyrean. Fifth element. In Plato's Timaeus speaking about air, Plato mentions that there is the most translucent kind which is called by the name of ether, but otherwise he adopted the classical system of four elements. Aristotle, who had been Plato's student at the Academia, agreed on this point with his former mentor, emphasizing additionally that fire sometimes has been mistaken for ether. However, in his book on the heavens he introduced a new, first element to the system of the classical elements of Ionian philosophy. He noted that the four terrestrial classical elements were subject to change and naturally moved linearly. The first element, however, located in the celestial regions and heavenly bodies, moved circularly and had none of the qualities the terrestrial classical elements had. It was neither hot nor cold, neither wet nor dry. With this addition, the system of elements was extended to five, and later commentators started referring to the new first one as the fifth and also called it ether, a word that Aristotle had not used. Ether did not follow Aristotelian physics either. Ether was also incapable of motion of quality or motion of quantity. Ether was only capable of local motion. Ether naturally moved in circles, and had no contrary, or unnatural, motion. Aristotle also noted that crystalline spheres made of ether held the celestial bodies. The idea of crystalline spheres and natural circular motion of ether led to Aristotle's explanation of the observed orbits of stars and planets in perfectly circular motion in crystalline ether. Medieval scholastic philosophers granted ether changes of density, in which the bodies of the planets were considered to be more dense than the medium which filled the rest of the universe. Robert Flood stated that the ether was of the character that it was subtler than light. Flood cites the 3rd century view of Plotinus, concerning the ether as penetrative in non-material. See also Ush. Quintessence. Quintessence is the Latinate name of the fifth element used by medieval alchemists for a medium similar or identical to that thought to make up the heavenly bodies. It was noted that there was very little presence of quintessence within the terrestrial sphere. Due to the low presence of quintessence, Earth could be affected by what takes place within the heavenly bodies. This theory was developed in the 14th century text The Testament of Lullius, attributed to Raymond Lull. The use of quintessence became popular within medieval alchemy. Quintessence stemmed from the medieval elemental system, which consisted of the four classical elements, and ether, or quintessence, in addition to two chemical elements representing metals. Sulfur, the stone which burns, which characterized the principle of combustibility, and mercury, which contained the idealized principle of metallic properties. This elemental system spread rapidly throughout all of Europe and became popular with alchemists, especially in medicinal alchemy. Medicinal alchemy then sought to isolate quintessence and incorporate it within medicine and elixirs. Due to quintessence's pure and heavenly quality, it was thought that through consumption one may rid oneself of any impurities or illnesses. In the Book of Quintessence, a 15th-century English translation of a continental text, quintessence was used as a medicine for many of man's illnesses. A process given for the creation of quintessence is distillation of alcohol 7 times. Over the years, the term quintessence has become synonymous with elixirs, medicinal alchemy, and the philosopher's stone itself. Legacy. With the 18th century physics developments, physical models known as ether theories made use of a similar concept for the explanation of the propagation of electromagnetic and gravitational forces. As early as the 1670s, Newton used the idea of ether to help match observations to strict mechanical rules of his physics. However, the early modern ether had little in common with the ether of classical elements from which the name was borrowed. These ether theories are considered to be scientifically obsolete, as the development of special relativity showed that Maxwell's equations do not require the ether for the transmission of these forces. However, Einstein himself noted that his own model, which replaced these theories, could itself be thought of as an ether, as it implied that the empty space between objects had its own physical properties. Despite the early modern ether models being superseded by general relativity, occasionally some physicists have attempted to reintroduce the concept of ether in an attempt to address perceived deficiencies in current physical models. One proposed model of dark energy has been named quintessence by its proponents, in honor of the classical element. The idea relates to the hypothetical form of dark energy postulated as an explanation of observations of an accelerating universe. It has also been called a fifth fundamental force. Ether and light. The motion of light was a long-standing investigation in physics for hundreds of years before the 20th century. The use of ether to describe this motion was popular during the 17th and 18th centuries, including a theory proposed by the less well-known Johann Bernoulli, who was recognized in 1736 with the prize of the French Academy. In his theory, all space is permeated by ether containing excessively small whirlpools. These whirlpools allow for ether to have a certain elasticity, transmitting vibrations from the corpuscular packets of light as they travel through. This theory of luminiferous ether would influence the wave theory of light proposed by Christian Huygens, in which light traveled in the form of longitudinal waves via an omnipresent, perfectly elastic medium having zero density, called ether. At the time, it was thought that in order for light to travel through a vacuum, there must have been a medium filling the void through which it could propagate, as sound through air or ripples in a pool. Later, when it was proved that the nature of light wave is transverse instead of longitudinal, Huygens' theory was replaced by subsequent theories proposed by Maxwell, Einstein and de Broglie, which rejected the existence and necessity of ether to explain the various optical phenomena. The results of the experiment influenced many physicists of the time and contributed to the eventual development of Einstein's theory of special relativity. Ether and gravitation. Ether has been used in various gravitational theories as a medium to help explain gravitation and what causes it. It was used in one of Sir Isaac Newton's first published theories of gravitation, Philosophia Naturalis Principia Mathematica. He based the whole description of planetary motions on a theoretical law of dynamic interactions. He renounced standing attempts of accounting for this particular form of interaction between distant bodies by introducing a mechanism of propagation through an intervening medium. He calls this intervening medium ether. In his ether model, Newton describes ether as a medium that flows continually downward toward the Earth's surface and is partially absorbed and partially diffused. This circulation of ether is what he associated the force of gravity with to help explain the action of gravity in a non-mechanical fashion. This theory described different ether densities, creating an ether density gradient. His theory also explains that ether was dense within objects and rare without them. As particles of denser ether interacted with the rare ether, they were attracted back to the dense ether, much like cooling vapors of water are attracted back to each other to form water. In the Principia, he attempts to explain the elasticity and movement of ether by relating ether to his static model of fluids. This elastic interaction is what caused the pull of gravity to take place, according to this early theory, and allowed an explanation for action at a distance instead of action through direct contact. Newton also explained this changing rarity and density of ether in his letter to Robert Boyle in 1679. He illustrated ether and its field around objects in this letter as well, and used this as a way to inform Robert Boyle about his theory. Although Newton eventually changed his theory of gravitation to one involving force and the laws of motion, his starting point for the modern understanding and explanation of gravity came from his original ether model on gravitation.